So we are on the 6th chapter. Till the last time we discussed the first two sections of the 6th chapter, which is the first is understanding of the mind, which is a friend or enemy, and then we spoke about the concepts of Ashtanga Yoga, how it is not practical in today's age. Now, Arjuna is going to ask a very important question, very pertinent question to all of us in our lives. This is about the success or failure in the process of yoga. So, this is something that most people who take up spirituality have as doubt in the mind. Somewhere at the back of the mind, the doubt is there. What if I don't perfect the process of spirituality? So, in this particular section, we will see how Krishna is helping Arjuna deal with this complicated question. So, Arjuna's question here is, Ayati Shraddhayopeta Yoga Chaliti Manasa Aprapyo Yoga Samsiddhim Kam Gatim Krishna Gacchati. So, Arjuna's question is, O Krishna, what is the destination of the unsuccessful transcendentalist who in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization with faith, but who later desists due to worldly mindedness and thus does not attain perfection in mysticism? So, this is a question that Arjuna is asking Krishna, and Krishna gives a series of explanations, understandings, how a yogi can deal with such a complication, or rather a question that one has. So, Arjuna's question essentially is that, what happens to somebody who starts the process of yoga, who starts the process of spirituality with great faith, but somewhere down the line, as he is progressing, as he is trying to advance, he loses focus and he fails. The question is, in life, not just in spirituality, overall in life, how many of us have faced failures ever? Put up a hand. Anybody faced failure in any aspect of life? Almost everyone. Some people are exceptional, I guess. I'll talk about it. So then you'll understand that at the end, everybody will put up their hands. So success and failures are not two opposite things. Usually, they are portrayed as opposites. Just like poverty and prosperity, being tall or being short, being good or being bad, being rich or being poor. Similarly, being successful or being a failure is considered to be opposite. But actually, that's not the right concept of seeing it. Both success and failure are both unidirectional. If dealt with, failure actually points you towards success. And therefore, every single failure that comes in life, whether it is in some resolution, some discipline, some relationship, some business failure, examination failure, all these failures are opportunities to grow. And therefore, if the whole thing is seen in the right perspective, then one can take steps in that right direction. Failing in exams. I'm sure everybody would have failed some point of time in their life in exams. Those who are CA students will be like, most happy about hearing that everybody fails. I mean, I know so many. My cousin sister, she's struggling. Fourth time, failed. So whenever she calls me and tells me, I failed again, I tell her, don't worry, next time is there. First time she called me, I said, don't worry. You can always pray to, Gaur Nitai. Two of them are there. So second time you will pass. The second time she failed, I said, don't worry. You can pray to the three Murtis, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. They will make you pass. Then third time she called me, I said, don't worry. You can pray to Chatur Kumar. 4 of them are there. They'll make you pass. Then now she called. I said, don't worry. Panchatattva is there. 5 of them are. They'll make you pass. So the list goes on. First time I failed was in my, after my 12th standard, answered my first semester of engineering. So I mean, after probably for the first time I failed miserably, and I failed in one subject called as engineering graphics. And the reason I failed was very interesting, because all my life I studied, whatever I studied in my life, whether it is maths or whether it is science or whether it is geometry, I studied by reading. I never used a paper and pen to study. I never practiced maths on paper and pen. So suddenly this subject came, engineering graphics. It was a completely art-oriented subject, and I'm not good at arts, basically. So I read and went. I was very confident. I knew everything. And first time in the exam paper, I had to use big chart papers and with the whole scales and all that. And I failed miserably because I prepared by reading, basically. Then the next semester, so basically, essentially what happened was, after 12th standard, you generally become very puffed up. I can crack anything, I can answer anything, I will not fail. And then first semester, generally, a first semester engineering student, they become very humble after first failure. So then I was really serious. The next semester, I studied with paper and pen first time. So essentially, failing is a part of life. You can't avoid it, And some way or other, people end up miserably. Either you fail because of ignorance, or you fail because you're just not interested in certain subjects, Like many students, they become very happy when you have multiple choice questions, because they get to test their faith on God. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Wherever the Hare ends, you tick that number. Some students fail because the thing seems so complicated, you just don't know how to answer it. This is a student who answered a maths paper. Find X. Here it is. Just sheer ignorance, basically. So failure in academics is one thing. Failure in achieving targets is a totally different thing. So many people want to achieve something in life and they target, this is what I want to achieve. And somehow or other, you try to achieve it, you miss. Like there was one fellow who was shooting targets on darts on a bullseye. And every time he was trying to hit, he was missing the target. So his wife was, sitting next to him. She asked him, "What are you doing?" So he said, "I'm missing you." He's thinking that target was his wife, he's trying to aim at her. Somebody's phone. So, one man, he went for an interview to Microsoft. This is a real story that happened. And this man went to apply for a janitor's job, essentially Bhangi's job, toilet cleaner in a Microsoft company. So when he went for the interview, he got selected, but after the whole interview got over, he was asked a question which he could not answer. And he was rejected because he could not answer that question. The question he was asked was, "What is your email address?" He said, "I don't have." He didn't have an email address. So they rejected him, saying that if you don't have an email address, you don't exist. So he didn't get that job, basically. Then he came out of Microsoft, of the company. Then when he came out on the street, he saw somebody selling tomatoes. So he bought a bunch of tomatoes with whatever little money he had. And he went and sold tomatoes somewhere else for a little more profit. And then slowly, he realized this is a good business. So he started buying tomatoes and selling tomatoes a little costlier. And soon, this fellow, he became a massive vegetable vendor. And then eventually, he went on to start his own insurance company. So somebody, after he became very successful, there's one magazine that came to interview him about the secret behind his success. And they told him, and he told this whole story about how he got rejected by Microsoft because he didn't have an email ID. So they told him, without having an email ID, if you became so big, what would have happened if you had an email ID? He said, I would have remained a janitor. I would have remained in that level. So sometimes what seems to be a failure actually can become stepping stones towards success. When we talk about failing in relationships on a personal level, that's even more painful thing, because essentially everything seems to be perfect when any relationship gets formed, but when it breaks, it's most painful, because to allow relationships to sustain, what it requires more than anything else is the concept of sacrifice. So most people today, they want powerful relationships, great relationships, but without the element of sacrifice. So relationships cannot happen without great sacrifices. Today, relationships fail not by the day, it fails by the hour, literally. I know one family, they got married, and the girl came home to the husband's house, and when she reached home, she saw something weird. And she saw that the culture in the husband's house was very different from the culture in their house. In 1 hour, she packed up and went back to her home. Over. Marriage got over in 1 hour, literally. Spent huge amounts of money. Everything gets over in 1 hour. What to speak of failure in personal discipline? So we want to do so many things. How many times we decide that we will study harder, work harder, exercise harder, and we end up failing. We make resolutions, then dissolutions, and no solutions. So as soon as you decide to do something, there is always a test. There is always a challenge that comes in. I often tell the example of, when we do fasting, like when we do Chaturmas, we eat grains once a day, many of us. So till the day of Chaturmas, nothing extraordinary happens. Everything is normal in life. The day Chaturmas begins, that day only somebody will give a very exciting item to eat. Some sweets, some cakes. Something that would have never ever come regularly. So essentially, first day of Chaturmas, you start wondering, did I make a mistake by deciding to do Chaturmas? 4 months. And interestingly, all the big festivals of the year come in Chaturmas only. So all the mega feasts of the year, all the most important celebrations of the year happen in Chaturmas. So everybody is feasting. Then you're wondering, did I make the right decision or no? So essentially, whenever you decide that I will do something different, I'll do something special, I'll do something which will test my determination, challenge my decision of deciding to work on my inner abilities. That time challenges come. So essentially, the whole idea behind failures is not a negative one, but rather it is a very positive aspect. Failure actually is a stepping stone to success. So there are two ways the two different types of mindset of people see. A person who is a pessimist, whenever he looks at the alphabet O, he looks at as the end of the word zero. The last word of the zero is O. But whenever an optimist looks at the word O, he looks at the first word of opportunity. So essentially, we have to decide what we want to do in life in terms of achieving our targets. So the way we perceive our goals, that way life will behave with us. So here, Arjun's question is very pertinent. So Arjun is asking Krishna, Kachin no bhayo vibratas, chinnabram iva nasyati, apraptasto mahabaho, vimudo brahmana pati. He says, O mighty armed Krishna, does not such a man who is bewildered from the path of transcendence fall away from both spiritual and material success and perish like a riven cloud with no position in any sphere? So Arjuna over here, he is asking a very important question. What happens to somebody who has taken up the path of spirituality, and after taking up the path of spirituality, he faces failure? So Arjuna is saying, is telling Krishna, my dear Krishna, for such a person, it is the most embarrassing situation. So, essentially, the material energy of the Lord, which is known as Maya Shakti, has two types of energies or powers. One is known as Avarnatmika Shakti, and the other one is known as Prekshetmatmika Shakti, which means Avarnatmika Shakti means covering potency. So it's like a wheel thrown on our face. We can't see the reality. So Arjuna's question is, what happens to me if I take up spiritual life and suddenly I get deluded by the illusion energy of the Lord? So he gives an example. The example that he gives is, if you have seen clouds, the clouds are sometimes in big chunks, and sometimes one small part of the cloud gets separated. So he's saying, my situation will become like a riven cloud. Which means, if from a big chunk of clouds, one small section gets separated, what happens to that section? What happens to that part of the cloud? It just disappears, because the wind blows it away, and it loses its existence, literally. It will be nothing, it will be nowhere. If you put it in regular today's language, Arjuna is saying that I'll become like Dobi ka kutta, na ghar ka na ghat ka. So he is saying, right now, as I'm starting to practice spiritual life, for a fallen yogi, for a yogi who has not been able to perfect his life, he has given up material things, but he has still not developed taste for Krishna. What happens to me? So essentially, we have left a lot of things. बहुत कुछ छोड़ दिया, और कृष्ण मिले भी नहीं. बीच में क्या होगा? What if you die at that point? That means, what will happen to somebody who has taken up spiritual life very seriously, made many sacrifices to be able to practice spiritual life very seriously, given up lot of temptations, given up lot of things to be able to practice spiritual life seriously. And then, after going a long way, suddenly he realizes that I am neither here nor there. When you start the process of Krishna consciousness, you are on one boat. That means you are on the boat of material life. Maya masti, fun, time pass in life. But then suddenly you see another boat coming, and the devotees are excitedly calling you, chalo aa jao, ye boat mein, isme bhi bahut maja hai, And then you keep coming for classes, and then you realize they seem to be having fun, might as well try going on that boat. And then the boat comes closer to you, you put one leg on that boat, but you're scared to remove one leg from this boat also, So over a period of time, the devotees give you confidence, nikalo, pair nikalo, hum hain aapke liye, And then you actually remove your leg from this boat, and you fully situate yourself on that boat. And then when the boat starts going apart, you start missing the first boat. Ye bahut acha tha, mere ko wapas khud hi marna hai udhar. So in such a situation, what do? That means, now that boat has gone some other direction, and this boat has gone another direction. And you say, now mere ko wapas wohi boat mein jana hai. Then what can devotees do? Jump maar ke nikal jao to. So then, at some point in your life, you start thinking, should I now go back? Because the boats seem to be very far away from each other. You don't really connect. Like, for example, when I started connecting with Krishna consciousness, at some point, after my engineering days, I had a lot of friends. I was like, having a big gang, during my engineering days. And then after that, I took spiritual life very seriously. And then a couple of months I stayed in the temple. Then I went back to my hometown, met my old gang again, We were in the same place where we would go, near a beach. And people were talking the same thing they used to talk before. But I couldn't connect with them only. And every time they would say something, I would I would give one philosophical example, and they would say, "Kya paka raha hai? Wapas philosophy jhad raha hai." So there was a total disconnection. Then I realized I can't understand what they are saying. They realized they can't understand what I am saying. So we realized we are on totally two different boats, So here Arjuna is trying to ask, my dear Krishna, what happens to the spiritualist who has gone very far away in the process of spirituality, transcendence, but after a certain point he realizes that I have not got perfection here and I have lost that also. So essentially, what happens to such a person? This is known as Asman ke tapka khajur mein atak gaya. So neither you fell on the ground nor you are in the sky. You are somewhere in between. One new person who started becoming a devotee, many months he's been coming. He came and met one very senior preacher of ours. And he told him, directly he's telling him, "You have made my life miserable." So he said, "How did I make your life miserable?" So he said, this new person is trying to tell, he said, "Prabhuji, now I don't get any enjoyment in material life. I go to movies, no fun at all in the movies. I go to parties with my friend. I sit in one corner, I am thinking, about what I heard in the classes. I am thinking about how people are just wasting their time. So whatever I try to do to enjoy my life, I am not able to enjoy only." So he said, "You have made my life miserable." This devotee, he told him, "Please give me the dust of your lotus feet. It only means you are making advancement." So essentially, in Krishna consciousness, when you start detesting material enjoyment, that is actually tapasya. That is actually a sign of advancement. That misery is actually your sign that you are advancing in spiritual life. If somebody comes and says that after many years of coming and practicing Krishna consciousness, although if somebody comes and says, "Prabhuji, aaj party mein maja aaya, bahut daba ke piya." So essentially you understand this guy is not progressing at all. So if somebody has some taste in material enjoyment, that means you're not progressing in spiritual life. So the sign of progress in spiritual life is that you have to develop some distaste for material enjoyment. So essentially, Arjuna's question is very interesting here. Yes, we may have developed some detest for material enjoyment, but we have not developed right taste for spiritual enjoyment. We have not developed great taste for the holy name. We have not developed great taste for hearing Krishna Katha. We have not developed great taste for seeing the deities. We have not developed great taste for association of devotees. What happens to such a person? So Krishna, he answers in a very interesting way and in a very hope-giving way. And this answer of Krishna actually is what every spiritualist, every transcendentalist needs to know. And that shows how different spiritual life is from material life. Just like a dog, in the Western world, dogs are practically more opulent life than most human beings in India. In US itself, 10 million dogs in US are beneficiaries of their master's will. So that means the master, when they die, they give the entire will to the dog, the entire property. Can you imagine? Dog ka kya life hai? 10 million people give their entire property in the name of their dog and die. So naturally, dog will live in luxury only, right? So here, people like dogs because they don't fight back. They just offer love. The quality of the dog having loyalty to the master is a quality that is very much appreciated in today's world. But interestingly, every dog has a belt tied to it. In fact, if there is a belt on the dog, you understand that the dog has a master, essentially. So when we take up the path of spirituality, essentially what it means is that we are becoming Krishna's dogs. The Kanti Mala is actually dog collar. When somebody wears the Kanti Mala, बोलते हैं मेरे को Kanti Mala पहनना है. Welcome to the gang. That means we are actually telling we want to become Krishna's dogs. So, there has to be some kind of pride in knowing that somebody has a master. So, what is the difference between a dog with a collar and dog without a collar? The dog with a collar has a master. That means he has a very secure life. And the dog without a collar means he has no master. He feels that he is free. He feels that he is independent. He feels that, I don't have to depend on anybody. I am free to go wherever I want. But he also knows that his life is in danger. कभी भी BMC, AMC, जो भी है अलग-अलग municipality उठा के लेकर सकता है कि नहीं? So having a collar is safety. So essentially, when devotees really take up the tapasya of wearing a Kanti Mala after deciding at a certain point in their life, it's actually a commitment to Krishna. That yes, my dear Lord, I am accepting that I have a master. In fact, people have so much love for the dogs. There is one in Govardhan Eco Village in Vada. We have 4 dogs, basically for security and things like that. So there are many Westerners who come there. The one American lady, she came, and the best thing she loved about GV was that we have dogs. And this lady went so crazy about those 4 dogs. She was ready to do anything. So she has sponsored those 4 dogs for their entire life. And not just that, regularly she wants to see them on FaceTime, on Skype. She wants to see how they are being taken care of. So much craze. So you can imagine if a dog can get so much love, affection, protection, just because the dog has a collar and a dog has accepted a master, then you can imagine how Krishna can take care of of people who have surrendered their lives to him. The beauty of Krishna is that he has so many people to take care of, and he has capacity to take care of also. So therefore, when we take up the spirituality, what Krishna is assuring us is that he is assuring us that kind of protection. So Krishna, he answers Arjun's questions about what happens to a yogi who falls down after executing the process of bhakti for a certain amount of time. So essentially, there are 2 types of yogis Krishna talks about. So first type of yogi is that one who has achieved very little progress in the path of bhakti. That means I started practicing bhakti, but after 10% I gave up. And there are some yogis who practice for a long period of time, very intensely. 70% they would have practiced, and then they give up. So essentially, what Krishna says is that those in the first category who give up after a short duration of practice, they go to the heavenly planets. And the second category, those who give up after a long duration of practice, they get another birth in the life, in the family of devotees, so that they can start from where they left intensely. Can you imagine if there is a college that advertises in this way? Those students who fail in one subject in the exam, they will get a free return ticket to Shimla. All their lodging, boarding, holiday arrangement will be made free by the college. Naturally, people are excited about, can you imagine, failing in one subject, you get to go to Shimla. And then there's another announcement. Those who fail in 4 subjects, they get to go to Switzerland. Yaar, kaisa college hai? What kind of college is this? People will be excited to get admission in such a college. Naturally, because it seems to be an exciting offer. This is exactly what Krishna is trying to tell us here in the Gita. Krishna is trying to tell us, take admission in this college of yoga. Those who take admission in this college of yoga, if you have failed miserably, 4 subjects fail, then you get to go to the heavenly planets. Swargaloka. Can you imagine? Those who fail in the process of yoga, that means after you start practicing bhakti, 10% में fail हो गए, ज़्यादा कुछ कर नहीं पाए, तो problem नहीं है. You will get to go to the heavenly planets. That's what Krishna is trying to tell. And then after the heavenly planets, you get birth in an aristocratic family. That means in a rich family. And then you have the facility to start from where you stopped. And those who have done tremendous progress in the path of bhakti, but fail miserably at that point of time after a lot of progress, then you get birth in a family of devotees. Then you start from where you left off. So essentially, the point is that whoever takes up the path of bhakti, you don't get lost. You have not lost anything, even if you fail at some point. And the coming to the path of bhakti doesn't happen by chance. It's not that anybody comes to the path of bhakti by chance. It is due to a previous effort. Today, if you are attracted to the process of bhakti, that means you have done something in your past life, because of which you have some inclination today. And now, what you do, you will get a future, a prospect. Prahlad Maharaj, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we find how he had such a natural affection for Krishna, natural affection for the Supreme Lord, in spite of the fact that he was born in a family of demons. He was born to Hiranyakashipu. His father was the wildest demon of that era. In spite of being born to such a wild demon, Prahlad Maharaj showed ecstatic symptoms in his childhood. From his childhood, he showed ecstatic symptoms. Ecstatic symptoms means, these are called Ashtavikar. Crying just spontaneously, laughing spontaneously, hair standing on end, perspiring. These are different symptoms that manifest in a pure devotee's life, and it just manifests very spontaneously, just because he remembers Krishna. Prahlad would just suddenly remember Krishna and start laughing. He would remember Krishna and start crying. He would remember Krishna and start dancing suddenly, So Prahlad would manifest these kind of symptoms from his childhood, literally. Because the previous life of Prahlad was a very interesting life. In his previous life, Prahlad Maharaj, he was completely absorbed in sense gratification. And one time, he was so much intoxicated into sense gratification, he actually one time was supposed to meet a prostitute in a forest. And while he was waiting for her in the forest, he saw that the place where he was waiting, it was like it was a desolated temple type of thing. So he said, this is not a clean place, so let me clean this place. So he cleaned the place just so that he would meet her comfortably. But interestingly, the place where he cleaned, the temple that he cleaned, was the temple of Nrsimhadev. And for a long period of time, nobody had cleaned the place, the abandoned place completely. And that day when he actually went there, happened to be Narsingh Chaturdasi. So, just by cleaning the temple on Narsingh Chaturdasi day, he got Agyata Sukriti. And due to this one single act of Prahlad Maharaj, he got birth in his next life as a devotee who was having such intense love for Krishna. To such an extent that Prahlad, he actually talks about his attraction to Krishna to his teachers. He tells them, just as an iron is attracted helplessly to a magnet, similarly, my consciousness is attracted to Krishna. He said, I have no independence. So can you imagine, where did this attraction to Krishna come from? It's not that in his previous life, Prahlad Maharaj was like an exalted person. But he did something to serve the Lord, for beginning his anartha nivritti, and that one act purified his consciousness so much that he got such a great birth, basically. So that means if one does abhyas in one's previous life, if one does some effort in one's previous life, one can make very swift progress in one's present life. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there is the story of Haridas Thakur. Now, Haridas Thakur was born in a Mohammedan family 500 years back in Navadip. So he was born in a Mohammedan family. That means he had no Vedic connection in that life. But somehow, though he was born in a Mohammedan family, he had a great attraction for chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, the holy names of the Lord. And he had such an attraction towards chanting the holy names that he would chant constantly. All day long he would be chanting. Haridas Thakur would chant every day 192 rounds of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Now, for us to chant 16 rounds is like a monumental task. I know people who, when they get up in the morning, they get up as if it's like a mega marathon to run. 16 rounds by the end of the day. Haridas Thakur would chant 192 rounds comfortably every day. That would take him about 22 hours. 22 hours chanting. And then whatever remaining part of what has to be done, he would do in the 2 hours. It's not that Haridas Thakur was chanting and bathing also, chanting and eating also, chanting and sleeping also. I mean, we sleep and chant or chant and sleep, we don't know. So Haridas Thakur is not that he is chanting and sleeping. He was exclusively chanting. He had so much taste for the holy name. So Haridas Thakur, when the Mohammedans, the king, the Qazi of that area, the governor of that area, he realized that this person is being born in a Muslim family, still is chanting Hindu God's name. He got very offended. He called him to the court. And he told him that you are born in such an exalted family. According to them, being born in a Mohammedan family is exalted birth. So he said, why are you wasting your time doing this, chanting Hindu God's name? You stop that and we will give you whatever you want. So Haridas Thakur said, I can't stop it. It's not that I'm doing it because somebody has told me. It's just spontaneously coming out of me. They told him, we will cut you to pieces if you don't stop. Haridas Thakur said, even if you cut me to millions of pieces, every piece of my body will chant the holy name. Can you imagine what kind of faith Haridas Thakur had? If somebody raises a stick on us and tells us stop chanting, we will say we will drop our mala there only. We want to stop only. We are looking for some reason to help us stop. Haridas Thakur, he said, do whatever you want, I will not stop chanting. And these people, the Qazi, he ordered that Haridas Thakur be beaten in 22 marketplaces. The history of that time was that if somebody gets beaten like that in even 4 or 5 marketplaces, that person will not survive, he would die. Haridas Thakur, in every marketplace, he was beaten so badly by very powerful wrestlers. But in spite of being beaten, Haridas Thakur continued chanting the holy names, incessantly, constantly. And as he was being beaten and he was chanting the holy names, he would look at the people who were beating him and smile at them. So these people are wondering, why is he smiling at us? We should be laughing at him and making fun of him. But Haridas Thakur was so much into chanting the holy names and was so absorbed in chanting the holy names that practically nothing could stop him from continuing to chant. Now, where did this faith come from? Essentially, Haridas Thakur, he was from his childhood attracted to the holy name. So this is from a previous lifetime that he got that culture and taste. Narad Muni, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a very interesting story about how Narad Muni became what he was. So in his previous life, he was a Gandharva whose name was Upabharana. And Narad Muni had gone to a yajna, a sacrificial ceremony. And in the yajna, somehow he got intoxicated in his previous life as Upabharana. He was a Gandharva. Very beautiful, very handsome looking person. And he got intoxicated by wine, liquor, and he saw some beautiful women. And in the presence of all the sages, in such an holy atmosphere, he started singing Bollywood songs, essentially. He started singing songs to attract the women. And the sages who saw him behaving like that, they cursed him that he'll be born on the earth planet in a very miserable life. And eventually, Narad Muni, in his next life, he got birth as a son of a maid servant on the earth planet. Very poor situation, very destitute conditions. So his mother, she was working as a maid servant, different houses. And one time in that village, a group of sages came. They were known as the Bhaktivedantas. They started living in that village, and they were performing Chaturmas. So they were not leaving that place for 4 months of the rainy season. So every day his mother would go and do service in the ashram, clean places and things like that. So Narad Muni would accompany his mother every day. And Narad Muni was a 5-year-old boy at that point of time. And these Bhaktivedantas, seeing Narad Muni come, and he would help his mother in serving the Bhaktivedantas. So when the Bhaktivedantas saw this boy was so simple and so special, they actually blessed him. And every day the Bhaktivedantas would give remnants of their food to Narad Muni to eat. And Narad Muni kept eating the Mahaprasad of these Bhaktivedantas, and slowly his heart got purified. And the Bhaktivedantas went away, and as soon as the Bhaktivedantas went away, giving Narad Muni profuse blessings, one day came that Narad Muni's mother was bitten by a snake, and she died, leaving him alone. So he had nobody to take care of, totally helpless condition. So generally when somebody is in such a condition, if you are having any faith in God, the first question you ask is, what is this? Why is God so cruel to me? But Narad Muni, when he goes through this particular situation in his life, he has complete faith in Krishna. He understands that Krishna is my father. And he understands that Krishna is concerned for my welfare. And he is never unconcerned. Sometimes a father may throw a child in the air. Now, I have seen fathers doing that, Whenever I have seen fathers doing that, I have always panicked very badly. Can you imagine a small baby thrown in the air like that, But the most amazing thing is, the father and child are both very happy. Everybody around is miserable, and because they don't have confidence that this will catch or no, But the father and child are totally happy. The reason is because the child understands that my father has concern for me and he has the ability to protect me. And similarly, when a devotee is put into anxiety or trouble, a devotee understands that Krishna doing this to me, throwing me in this anxiety, is like a father throwing a child in the air. When Krishna does that, when Krishna throws his devotees in anxiety, that actually Narad Muni calls this as Krishna's anugraha. That means Krishna's special benediction. So that means Krishna does not throw everybody in anxiety. When Krishna has special anugraha on somebody, when Krishna wants to bestow a special favor on somebody, that person he throws in trouble. So if something happens to us and Krishna is throwing us in trouble, understand that Krishna has special anugraha on you. Now you may start praying that, Krishna, please don't have special anugraha on me. I can't handle it. But what to do? Now we can't choose. We can't tell Krishna, you have on me and you don't have on the other person. It happens. It's Krishna's will. So whenever it happens to you, you should understand it is Krishna's special anugraha on us. So Narad Muni didn't take the death of his mother as a curse, but he took it as a special boon of Krishna. And he started traveling. And within a matter of few days of traveling and having intense faith in, just imagine a 5-year-old child. Now, a 5-year-old child doesn't know anything. Can't do anything to protect himself, can't do anything to feed himself, can't do anything to do anything for himself. But Narad Muni had so much faith in Krishna's protection, Krishna's presence, that Narad Muni just started traveling in the forest alone. And within a matter of few days, literally, Narad Muni actually had darshan of Krishna. And Krishna, when he gave darshan to Narad Muni, he told him that now that you have seen me, you can continue practicing your spiritual life. You won't see me again in this life. But if you continue practicing, in your next life, you will actually attain perfection. And Narad Muni's whole life he continued, practicing Krishna consciousness, chanting the holy names of the Lord. And in his next life, he became Narada, the transcendental spaceman, who has a spiritual body, and who is worshipped literally all over the world. And therefore, essentially, what we have to learn from this particular understanding is that, in spite of our busy schedules, in spite of having so many things to do in life, if we take out time for Krishna, what we are doing is we are securing our future. So Krishna is telling us, if you practice yoga for a short period of time, if you practice bhakti for a short period of time, then you get born in a very rich family. He says, Prapya punya kritam lokan usitva shashvati samaha suchina shrimatam gehe yoga brashta bijayate. So essentially, what Krishna is saying is that the unsuccessful yogi, after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets of pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. So essentially, that means if you practice bhakti for a short period of time, then in your next life you are born in an aristocratic family where your basic needs are taken care of. And from there, you have to focus only on bhakti. So there are two ways to become rich in your next life, basically. I'm not talking about this life. Next life. One way to become rich is by your karma. That means, just by working very hard in this life, accumulating a lot of pious credits, punya karma, then you accumulate enough pious credits, so then next life you get aristocracy. Those who are rich by karma, how do you know them? How do you know they are rich by process of their previous life's karma? We know because they have no interest in spirituality at all. So you'll find two kinds of rich people in the world. First kind of rich people are very rich karmically, no interest in spirituality at all. And second type of rich people are those who are yoga vrashta. That means in their previous life they practiced bhakti, but they gave up after a certain point of time. And then the next life they get birth in a aristocratic rich family. But the difference between these two rich people is that the second type of rich people are very spiritually inclined. You will find in society both types of rich people. Those who are karmically rich and those who are rich by practicing bhakti in their previous life. And so when you reach at that point where you actually get a new birth and you have opulences, the problem is there is a tendency to get distracted by these opulences. There is a tendency to get distracted, and get into too much of these opulences only. And therefore, one has to, in spite of opulences, be focused. And the second type of yogi, Krishna says, is that he says, Athava yoginam eva kule bhavati dhimatam eta dhi durlabhataram loke janma yad idrishim. He says, or if an unsuccessful yogi, after a long practice of yoga, he takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom, certainly such a birth is rare in this world. On taking such a birth, he revives the divine consciousness of his previous life and again tries to make further progress in order to achieve complete success. By virtue of the divine consciousness of his previous life, he automatically becomes attracted to the yogic principles even without seeking them. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist stands always above the ritualistic principles of the scriptures. And when the yogi engages himself in sincere endeavor in making further progress, being washed off all contaminations, then ultimately achieving perfection after many, many births of practice, he attains the supreme goal. So here Krishna is trying to tell that the second type of yogi who practices the process of bhakti for a long period of time and then he somehow or the other doesn't complete, he gets birth in a family of transcendentalists. That means he is born in a family where devotional atmosphere is intensely there. Right from birth, the atmosphere is very, very highly spiritual. Like in Europe, there's one small girl. When she was about 2 years old, 2-year-old children, what they know? Nothing. They literally can't speak also properly. She started singing Mangalarti. Can you imagine? 2-year-old child. And then as she started growing, when she was a little bigger, when she could read a little bit, she started asking for some very esoteric book of Krishna consciousness. Some Radha Krishna pastime, some very highly esoteric book. So their parents, they just couldn't understand who this person is. So it's not just ordinary. Like one of our devotees, young boy, the first time he went to Vrindavan, he had an experience that he is still now not able to overcome. When he stepped in the Krishna Balaram temple, ISKCON temple in Vrindavan, the moment he stepped in, he felt very strongly, I have been here before. Very strongly he felt, I have been here before. And when he entered Prabhupada's Samadhi, Vrindavan is a place where Prabhupada actually left his body. And that Prabhupada's Samadhi is the highlights of Vrindavan, because Prabhupada's body is actually there below the Samadhi. When he entered Prabhupada's Samadhi, this boy fainted. This boy said, I have been here before when the Samadhi was being built. In his previous life, this boy it seems he was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. Very strongly connected to the movement, from his childhood literally. So and then he lost touch, and in the next life, he got the connection back again after he came in touch with ISKCON. So there are so many examples of children who are just born into a devotional family, and right from day one, the kind of practice they have, the kind of connection they have with Krishna is just amazing and phenomenal. That shows that somebody who has done a long practice of yoga in a previous life and then somehow it breaks. In the next life, that person gets to start from where he left off. And therefore, Krishna, he gives these very beautiful hope-giving verses. He tells Arjun that when a yogi engages himself in sincere endeavor in making further progress, being washed of all contaminations, then ultimately achieving the perfection after many, many births of practice, he attains a supreme goal. So a yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the empress, and greater than the fruitive worker. Therefore, Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi. So Krishna is telling Arjuna over here in these verses that when you become a yogi, when you start practicing the process of bhakti yoga, nothing will be lost. You will not lose anything. So the fear that, what if I don't achieve it? What if I don't make it? What if I fail? That fear keeps stopping us from going ahead. That fear keeps stopping us from taking up process of Krishna consciousness wholeheartedly. And we want to keep a little bit of material connection also. Here Krishna is assuring us, don't worry, jump into it. If not this lifetime, you can continue in the next lifetime. There is no loss. How much ever endeavor you do in this life, in a life of a yogi, a life of a transcendentalist, life of a devotee, there is no stop. There is only a pause, if at all. That means wherever you pause, you continue from there. It's not that you lose anything in life. And therefore, I'll end with a very interesting story that the Srimad Bhagavatam gives. And this story actually talks about how whatever devotion you do, it carries on to many lifetimes. There was a very great king named Bharata. Of course, there are many Bharatas. There are 3 Bharatas in the Vedic scripture. This is one of those very powerful kings. So, Bharata, he was ruling practically the entire world at that point of time. At a certain point in his life, he decided that he wants to take up spirituality very seriously. He handed over his kingdom to his sons and he quit. He walked into the forest, started practicing tapasya. And Bharat Maharaj, he was so intensely into the process of devotion that very rapidly he progressed. And he reached to the stage of bhava in a very short time. So bhava is one stage below prema. Prema is like the highest level of devotion, love of God. Bhava is one step below prema. So there's a whole series, which starts with Adao Shraddha, Tada Shadhu Sangha, Anartha Univritti, then Nishta, Ruchi, Asakti, Bhava, and then Prema. So these are like stages of progress in devotion. So the highest stage is Prema, and one stage below that is Bhava. That means Bharat Maharaj almost made it to Prema Bhakti. He was at the stage of Bhava. At that time, something happened in his life. He was in the forest, naturally. The environment was not that, safe. So one day, as he was practicing his tapasya, he suddenly saw a tiger attacking a deer. And this deer, she was pregnant, heavily pregnant. To save herself from the tiger, she jumped. And somehow, as she was jumping, in the air, she delivered a baby. And the baby fell into the river. And the mother fell on the other side and she died. So Bharat Maharaj, when he saw this baby deer struggling for its life inside the water, he felt compassionate. A devotee, one of the qualities of a devotee is compassion. So he got up, he saved that baby deer's life. And when he came back to see the mother was dead. So now he didn't know what to do with the baby. He said, I can't leave the baby in the forest because tiger will eat it. So he said, let me keep the baby with me till it grows up to a certain age. So Bharat Maharaj kept the baby deer with him, and baby deer fell in love with Bharat Maharaj. Naturally, he didn't have a mother. Bharat was the only mother. So the baby deer was totally dependent on Bharat Maharaj, roaming around him all the time, licking him, sleeping on his lap. When Bharat Maharaj would do tapasya, the baby deer will come and walk around him, smell him, doing all funny things. Bharat Maharaj naturally could not focus only. And over a period of time, Bharat Maharaj developed intense attachment to this deer. And he really, first was compassion, then it became attachment. So he became so attached to the deer that when he was dying, at the time of death, he was thinking, what will happen to the deer after me? So the last thought that he had while dying was not about Krishna, but it was about the deer. So in his next life, Bharat Maharaj became a deer. But because he reached the stage of bhava, so though he was in the deer's body, he remembered everything of his previous life. He remembered exactly everything. And he decided to continue his devotion in the body of a deer. So he continued focusing on his bhakti in the body of a deer. And eventually, when he gave up his body, he got the next body of a human being. And he became a person who was named as Jada Bharat. And interestingly, when Jada Bharat was born, from the moment he was born, so Jada Bharat had memories of not only his dear life, he also had memory of his previous life as Bharat also. Perfectly conscious of what he did, what mistake he did, he didn't want to repeat the mistake this life. So what Jada Bharat did was, he acted as a madman. Absolutely disconnected from the world, absolutely disconnected from society, but internally focused completely on Krishna. So people in society started considering him to be a mad person. So nobody would disturb him. At max they would shout at him, throw stones on him. So nobody was bothered about him at all. So he got to absorb himself deeper in his devotion to Krishna. At a certain point, Jada Bharat was roaming around in some village. And over there, the king, whose name was Rahugana, he happened to be passing by. And Rahugana, he was in a palanquin. And one of the people who were carrying the palanquin, that person, he got injured or something. So he couldn't come to carry the palanquin. So they were finding somebody of the same height and who was little well built. They found Jada Bharat roaming around over there. They caught him and they made him carry that palanquin. Now Jada Bharat had nothing to give and take with anything. So he did what he was told. But he was completely in his transcendental world, remembering Krishna. So as they were walking, suddenly they came across a place where there were a group of ants accumulated. So Jada Bharat didn't want to stamp on those ants. Naturally, he had great compassion. So to avoid the ants, he kind of moved a little aside. And Rahugana, he got a jerk. And then he got very angry. He got very upset. He started shouting at Jada Bharat. He said, what kind of nonsense? He actually kicked Jada Bharat. And then, when Rahugana started abusing Jada Bharat like anything, Jada Bharat started speaking. So nobody had ever heard Jada Bharat speak in their life. He only acted like a mad person. illogical, totally insane type. And suddenly Jada Bharat started speaking very logical and very deep philosophy. He started telling Rahugana about how Rahugana is looking at life from a bodily concept. And he started actually preaching to Rahugana how he should live as a king, focusing his life on higher principles. Rahugana was so impressed. He knew this person cannot be ordinary. He got down, actually fell at Jada Bharat's feet. He eventually accepted Jada Bharat as his guru. And Jada Bharat spent his entire life completely focusing on Krishna, and he actually perfected his life. And he went back to the spiritual world. So this story teaches us how one person went through 3 lifetimes. But throughout the 3 lifetimes, he never really forgot the focus that he had. And he didn't lose all the pious credits. He didn't lose all the fruit of bhakti that he did in his previous life. It continued to his next life also. And eventually he could perfect his life. So what we learned today was, in material life, failure means a failure. You need to go up. You need to step up to overcome the failure to make it a success. But in the path of bhakti, the path of spirituality, no matter what effort you put in, your effort does not last. And the second thing we understood is that Krishna is like our master, and all of us are like dogs of Krishna. And just like a master puts effort in trying to take care of his dog, trying to make sure that the dog is protected, and he tries to put an effort in trying to keep the dog comfortable and happy, Krishna pulls back his devotees and takes care of them very personally. And then Krishna also says that even if you take up the path of bhakti and you're not able to perfect it in this life, then also there is no need of losing hope. Krishna says, if one practices for a short period of time and gives up the path of bhakti, one reaches heavenly planets and takes birth in a rich family or righteous family, and then can continue the path of bhakti from there. And one who practices for a long period of time, such a person takes birth in a spiritual family, a family of Vaishnavas, and for such a person, he can practice right from day one and perfect his life in the next life. So essentially what Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna is that there is no need of despair. There is no loss in the path of bhakti. There is no failure in the path of bhakti. Whatever is there is just progress. So in Kali Yuga, this is very important to understand. Of course, there is a asterisk mark to this particular series of verses, because many people consider these series of verses to be guarantee. Kuch bhi karo, problem nahi hai. Krishna hai hamare liye. It's not a guarantee of that sort. So we shouldn't take advantage of Krishna's compassion. We should understand that Krishna's compassion is there as a backing for us in case we slip, in case we go away. But we should understand that we should put our effort as much as possible. And in the process, if something happens, then we still have nothing to lose. That's what we understand from this series of verses. Hare Krishna.